to continue the conversation now with Shaheen Limbada and Kara Langley of Veristat.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. We're very excited to be here today to share with you Veristat's DCT strategies and solutions, and specifically in the conduct of complex clinical trials. Veristat is a full-service CRO with an integrated DCT suite. Over the last couple of days, we've heard a lot the word interoperability, and at Veristat, we've taken our full-service offering and have combined it with our DCT services under one umbrella. It's effectively the way we work. And how we do that, one of our first steps is to evaluate each protocol that comes our way and identify bespoke solutions really to optimize the patient experience. Today, we're going to be sharing one of those case studies with all of you. And Kara, who's a project manager, will walk you through this particular case study focused on pediatric rare disease patients. We're going to focus on the patient participation challenges as well as data collection challenges, and share the strategies that we've been deployed in order to overcome these and other obstacles that were faced during the trial, not to mention having to start the trial and manage it throughout the pandemic. Before we begin, I would normally spend some time here as one of our first steps in our process is to really profile the patients, but due to the time limit, I will kind of skip through that to a certain extent. But it's a really critical step in our process in order to understand the characteristics of the patient, the challenges that they're being faced with, in order for us to bring on the appropriate solutions to enable them to participate in clinical trials. Canavan disease is a serious and ultra-rare disease which impacts children. It has a negative impact on their quality of life, and it also results in progressive neurological decline, halting and regression of developmental milestones, and unfortunately, in this case, within the first 10 years, death. For these patients and their families, day-to-day care is extremely challenging, coupled with limited mobility, which requires specialized feeding chairs and large vehicles for transportation to take them to and from places like potentially a clinical trial site, coupled with seizure management and other complications. One can easily see how difficult it would be to manage day-to-day, let alone participate in a clinical trial. And unfortunately for these children, participation in clinical trial is their only hope. That's why the work that we're all doing here today in the DTRA community, these DCT solutions and strategies that we're deploying are so important. It gives an opportunity for these patients hope. We need to create accessible trials. We need to ease the burden on the patient and continue to push forward and leverage these DCT strategies that we're all deploying. At Veristat, we're very proud to be able to do so under one umbrella, and Kara's going to walk us through an example of how we've been successful doing so.
Thank you, Shaheen. Natural history studies tend to be complex, and the Canon form study is particularly complex. So not only are we working with a pediatric rare disease population, we're also collecting two distinct types of data. We're pulling select pieces of data out of the patient medical records, which we call retrospective data, and we're also collecting data at scheduled study visits or prospective data. The prospective data that is of greatest interest to us is motor function data, so assessments of fine and gross motor function, as well as language perception and cognitive ability. The motor function data is collected by trained physical therapists who have experience in research, and you'll hear me refer to them as motor function raters or raters. There's other prospective data that's really important, including measurements of head circumference, quality of life assessments that our caregivers fill out, neurological exams performed by pediatric neurologists, and N-acetylaspartase measurements, NAA, which is a key biomarker in Canavan disease. So although multiple in-person visits are required for our study, taken the patient population and the challenges to the caregivers that Shaheen highlighted, We've always considered decentralized solutions from the very beginning. Canavan disease is truly ultra rare. That means that our patients are all over the world. It also means that specialists are few and far between. Together, that means that a central site model was required from the very beginning. Our visit structure varies based on the age of the patient. So as patients get older, the frequency and intensity of those visits becomes less and less. And that's really important when you consider the travel challenges of an older patient who might be larger and have more complex medical problems. Very central to our story is this idea that we decoupled the rater visits from the clinic visits. So our physical therapists actually schedule visits directly with the patients and their families, and the clinic visits are somewhat independent of that, where we're collecting more of that traditional clinical trial data. And the protocol was designed with flexibility in visit windows from the very beginning. So this means that the clinical study coordinators as well as the parents have some level of autonomy in deciding when they're going to have visits and when they're going to be able to actually travel into the clinic. We did plan home health nursing from the very beginning. So again, the idea of lessening the burden on the family and having some of those important biological measurements and things like the head circumference happening in the home was an aspect of the study that we considered from the very beginning. And then importantly, parents who provide medical records for retrospective data collection can opt out of participating in prospective data collection. So again, it's that theme of options for the patients and their caregivers. Just as decentralized solutions are benefiting our patients and their caregivers, they can also benefit our study sites. So Veristat developed and managed a call center, a centralized call center, and that means that patient identification, translation of consent forms, and medical record collection is happening before those patients are officially referred to a site. We also developed a process for medical record collection that benefits the parents and the study coordinators because they're not having to chase those records down before they can enroll in the trial. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then considering the very complex data set that we had envisioned from the beginning of the trial, Veristat took a lot of time considering data flow. To allow independent data collection by our physical therapists, there was an ECOA developed, which means that they can actually enter data into an iPad when they're with the family. There's aspects of retrospective data collection that are also centralized. So we have a team of childhood development experts that look at the medical records, take key pieces of developmental milestone data, and score them and create a data set. Pretty early on, we learned that those data sets were really large and really complex, and our study sites were struggling with data entry. So Veristat actually provided data entry support to the sites to lessen the burden on those coordinators once again. So medical record collection. If you think about a global population, it's probably not surprising that the medical records vary in complexity based on the age of the patient, where they live, and what access to care they have. We worked with a specialized medical record retrieval service so that they can speak directly with the family, get the names of providers, and collect those medical records on behalf of the families. This process started with consent of the caregivers, and it is compliant with all local data privacy regulations. So GDPR, HIPAA, again, it might not be surprising that the solution for medical record retrieval really varies based on where the patient lives. I'll now talk a little bit about how COVID-19 impacted us. Physical therapists are accustomed to collecting data based on direct observation of movement. And the can-inform assessments that were chosen required, in some cases, manipulation and positioning of the child. And when our patients couldn't travel to clinical sites and our physical therapists could not go to their homes, it was potentially devastating for us. So when we realized that that wasn't a possibility anymore, the study team developed a pilot program we took all of the assessments that were planned for CAN-INFORM and assessed them for their overall contribution to the understanding of Canavan disease progression, as well as the feasibility of performing them over a teleconferencing platform. Our physical therapists were trained to perform those assessments remotely. We chose 2 to 3 families per study site to participate in the pilot, which they did voluntarily, and thank you to them for doing that. And then the data that was collected was actually formally analyzed to assess inter and intra-rater reliability. We now have a remote assessment plan and a rater reliability plan that allows us to collect data in a validated manner remotely, and it undergoes ongoing QC for that reliability piece. Overall, we had a 1-year delay due to COVID-19. However, we have been able to continue to collect data from our patients over this teleconferencing platform. We can't really talk about the remote visits without considering the tremendous logistical and technological challenges that they present. When we moved to the teleconferencing platform, the caregiver became a key central player in the assessments, meaning that they had to participate and act as the physical therapist at times. We developed a toy kit to support this activity, and it's just what it sounds like. It's a plastic bin, it's filled with toys, some rattles, light-up toys, dolls in some cases that you might be able to buy on Amazon. And due to the number of materials that we needed, we worked with a specialized ancillary supply vendor who was able to procure those toys, kit them, and warehouse them. So when we have a new patient enroll in the study, we can actually deploy a kit on demand. We also provided the families with iPads, a mount, and a tripod. If you imagine a child who can't move their head from side to side, details such as eye movements are critically important to a physical therapist. That meant that the iPad had to be placed in such a way that the physical therapist could see the child at all times, see those small details, and that's where the tripod and the mount become really important. We've actually gone through several iterations of that setup so that it's safe, it can be placed over the baby, and we have no fear of it falling. So again, we're considering the safety of the child and the convenience to the family as well. Veristat played a key role in developing all of the materials that were provided to the caregivers. So this included instructions on how to set up the technology, what materials were in the toy kit, and how they were to be used. And we pushed all of those documents through ethics committees and had them translated into the multiple different languages that we needed for the global population. So it was quite a logistical challenge. A complex study like CAN-INFORM is ripe with lessons learned, and it truly is a customized solution for our study sponsor and our patient population. There's aspects of the decentralized strategies that have really benefited us. And I want to point out that we've enrolled a larger number of patients that we planned, which is actually huge in rare disease. Our study sponsor hoped to get at least 30 patients in the trial at the very beginning. Today, we've enrolled 52 patients. They come from 12 different countries, and they speak 10 native languages. Of those 52 patients, we've had 1 discontinuation. And I think that really speaks to the care that we've put into understanding our patient population and making sure that the solutions we have in place really work for them. We also recognize that not all decentralized solutions are appropriate for every population, for every study. Although we planned home health nursing from the very beginning, as a result of the pandemic, it hasn't really panned out, hasn't come to fruition. And so that's something that is considered for our treatment trial, but not really part of our natural history study as of yet. The return to this hybrid model of in-person visits and remote visits has been a little bit difficult. But because we have this platform for remote performance of motor function assessments, we're still able to collect a subset of data on most of our patients, and that's been huge for us. Shaheen?
Perfect. Thank you, Kara, for sharing that wonderful experience. We hope we've been able to showcase to you all the wonderful efforts around this room here today for many of the technologies, the processes, and the systems are why it's so important that these decentralized strategies continue to be deployed. It is truly giving hope to these patients, and we thank you very much. We'll be at booth 10 if you have any more questions about this particular case study. Thank you all.
Thank you.